What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Discovery Podcast, the show where we unbox, discover, and discuss the latest drops in personal and professional development. We are being brought to you by Zenboks. You know what? Take control. Download Zenboks on the App Store today and begin your journey of discovery and self-elevation. I'm your host, Declan Roberts, and we're coming to you live from the Toronto Podcast Studio this evening. Now, we have some special guests with us here today, but let's talk about my co-host, the beautiful, the vivacious, Melissa Spatafora. How you doing, Mel?
I'm good. How are you?
The one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, Andre Polo.
How you doing, everybody? Glad to be here to speak to you and our very special guest that's about to get introduced.
I don't even know if I can follow up with that. With our special guest is the beautiful Steph Sullivan. Steph, how are you?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for the compliment.
So before we even talk about anything about Steph and your journey, which we're all really excited to hear, as we're starting off the new year and it's 2020, I want to go around and ask everyone, what is any New Year's resolutions? Andre.
New Year's resolutions. I don't really have any. I have New Year's goals, ambitions.
Okay.
First and foremost is to introduce everybody to this amazing app that we've been working on over the last year called Zenboks. And as well as just continuing my own personal journey of personal development and personal elevation. That's really my goals for 2020. Get as many people to experience this app as possible and make myself the best version of myself.
Okay. Mel?
I actually do have a New Year's resolution. It's actually to read at least 50 books this year.
Did you say 50 or 15?
50.
Wow.
How many pages in each book?
At least 100.
Okay.
I like to read. And so not your average paper book, but through mobile, through an iPad while I'm working out. So I basically read at least a book a week right now. So I think I'll hit the 50.
I think so too. Steph.
My New Year's resolution is to travel more, to take some space away from the things that I do love doing, but to experience more of the world, try some cuisine that I've never tried in authentic places, and meet some new people.
So I guess I'm up next. So I think for me, last year, for New Year's, what I did was instead of going out to party, I actually stayed home and I created a vision board. But not really a vision board, more I like to say an accomplishment board, like the things I want to accomplish in 2020. So I put some on. I had about 8 pictures and I put it away and I actually forgot about it throughout the year. About September, I pulled it out and I didn't realize I accomplished 4 out of the 6. So this year I kind of did the same thing. So I got some goals I want to accomplish. One is I want to do a 10K marathon. Another one is I actually want to start doing kickboxing. And I want to do a fitness competition. Actually compete on stage. It's always been a big goal of mine. Always been kind of more intimidated because I'm like, can I really get my body to that level? So I'm actually just saying this so you guys can help hold me accountable.
I love it. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
So anyway, with that being said, let's get right into it. Steph, let's talk a little bit about your journey and what brings you to our show today.
Yeah, so a little bit about me. Fun fact, because a lot of people don't know this, but my full name is Stephanie, and it's actually spelled with a PH. Whoa. But it's spelled with an FF because there's a story behind it. When I first got social media, this was back when I was working as a student nurse, all the kids want to add you on social media when you're their nurse. So I had to have like an alter ego. So I started spelling my name FF on all social media. And then it kind of stuck. And then now everyone's just super confused how to spell my name. So I take all forms of my name.
Okay.
And I'm cool with all of it.
Now, I believe, Mel, you took one of Steph's courses. Is that how you?
Yeah, I took one of her classes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Her sweat bar class at Bolo. It was really intense. I loved it. I couldn't feel my arms after maybe about 3 minutes, but it was fantastic.
Was it only boxing, or what type of class was it?
So I teach bar. So
Okay.
it's a lower impact style class.
Okay.
It's basically lightweight, so 1 to 3 pound weights. It's an upper body focus class. Pulses, holds, and a lot of those sneaky little movements that catch up to you really quick.
So based on that, because I think a lot of people think, oh, I need to lift heavy. And you just said like 1 to 3 pounds.
Yeah.
And Mel was just saying she got destroyed.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about the importance of sometimes lifting small versus lifting heavy.
Yeah, I used to think that too. When I got into fitness originally, I was thinking that it was all about do more, do more, do more. And as we talk more, you're going to understand that my whole philosophy is, in fact, do less. And with light weights, it's all about reps. So it really is about finding the fatigue in those muscles and those small micro muscles that are super important, especially if you're someone that lifts heavy or boxes, because you're stabilizing the muscles and you're working on those small intricate areas, especially in the shoulders. That's going to help prevent injuries if you're lifting heavy or throwing hard punches. So it's a good compliment if you box or you lift heavy. And I'll have guys come to my class that totally underestimate the 2 pound weights and then pick up
Like
some
really
fives.
big guys?
Yeah, and then pick up some 5s or even some 3s, and who like completely fatigue and can't do it. And it's just a testament to changing up your routine. Also, if you think, oh, I'm strong, I can definitely do this, it's a very humbling experience.
So what is like your rep range?
It all depends on the moves we're doing.
Give me a typical class for people that are listening.
It actually isn't so much rep focused, because the way that bar is it's to the beat. So it's like more about musicality. So depending on the song and the pace of the song, you're going to be doing different things. But let's just say that, I don't know if you did the 30 or the 45 minute. I think you did 45.
Yeah.
We really don't put the weights down. Like, we take small breaks, but we're just changing the movement each time. We're switching through a different movement so that you're moving on to a different muscle, but you're constantly fatiguing small areas. So, I mean, the reps could go, let's say, for like a whole song, we're working one muscle group.
And how did you kind of get involved into this style of fitness?
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting story. As I mentioned, I was really into high intensity boot camp workout, cardio, like just trying to get a good sweat, looking at my Fitbit, how many calories am I burning? I was really obsessed with working out. In fact, I look back and I think it was starting to take a negative toll on my mental health. And
I do want to add,
yeah,
for those who can't see stuff, she's in great shape. So were you out of shape before you started? Like,
no,
okay.
I wasn't, but my body, my physique, if you were to look at me and compare how I looked then and how I looked now, I was very skinny then. I was doing a lot of cardio, running 15K, 20K races often. And in fact, I had a lot of injuries, and I definitely wasn't healthy on the inside. So when I got into bar, it was an interesting transition because I was really burnt out in my career, and I actually ended up breaking my arm, which was like the pivoting moment, saving grace to all things related to fitness and my mental health. And it gave me some time away from fitness to rebalance and recalibrate. And I actually when I first got back into fitness, bar was the first thing I did. So the reason being is because I could actually rest my cast on the bar. So most bar classes actually have a physical ballet bar. That's the style of movement it's based on. So I would rest my arm on the bar, and I could still do the class just by like having that support.
Dedication.
Yeah, I was like really into getting back, and it was also low impact. So it wasn't like I was going to further injure myself. I got obsessed with it. And then I actually went to Costa Rica on a bar and yoga retreat. And that's where everything like really fell into place. I was doing 2 bar classes a day, lots of yoga and stretching in between. And then I realized that my body was really responding to these types of movements, and was really humbling, because I was like, this isn't the typical workout that I thought that I needed to be doing to work out. It's not your typical. So when I got back from Costa Rica, it took a couple months, but I ended up being approached by someone about a certification. And I was kind of like, yeah, let's do it. I didn't really think much about it. I was also doing it to learn more about the movement style, because it was something I wasn't used to. And from there, it's kind of just snowballed. It took me a while to get into teaching, because like we all have, there was some fear and hesitation around what that meant, and that new identity as a fitness instructor versus someone that just consumed fitness. And And then I just kind of went for it and ended up actually getting hired at the studio that I was a member at, which is Bolo, downtown Toronto. And I really feel at that time it was the perfect alignment because Bolo just represents body love and intuitive movement and listening to your body and sometimes scaling back if you need to. So they offer high impact classes, low impact classes. And I was so happy that I was given the space to create my class because it's very unique to the Toronto wellness scene. And I've worked closely with Callie, the owner of Bolo, to really make that something special. And I'm blessed to work at my dream studio.
I want to take you back to your time as a nurse. I'm really interested to kind of learn more about that part of your life and career so that I can better understand the transition to more of your current stage of your life.
Yeah, so it's actually a really interesting, kind of like think of it as a mountain analogy where I climbed through my career, and it wasn't until recently that I kind of hit a pivotal moment where I feel like I'm coming back down the mountain. So what I mean by that is I started nursing. So basically, let's wind it right back to high school. I knew I wanted to be in healthcare when I was in high school. It was very clear to me that I was meant to help people from a young age. I was always that kid that was like helping other kids or helping my parents. I was very mature and very independent at a young age. And I think going into healthcare, you really need to possess that because it's a hard profession and it takes a lot. So right out of high school, right into nursing school. From nursing school in the summers, I was working at Sick Kids, and then I got right into nursing out of university. And I knew even when I was in nursing school, I could see the people I was working with. And I'm a firm believer that if you look around in your workplace at people that have been there for 20 years and you don't like what you see, then there's a problem. Because if you can't see yourself being in a place and getting to where they are, then there's a bit of a disconnect. And I noticed that right away. And it was really challenging because I didn't understand why I felt disconnected from the career that I wanted for so long.
I wouldn't want a nurse that doesn't like her job. I
Yeah.
don't want her working on me.
Yeah.
Like, real talk.
It wasn't so much that I didn't like the job. I didn't like what the job was doing for me.
Okay.
So a lot of people go into healthcare because they want to help people. And that's
Right.
that's the main thing people go into it for. Unfortunately, nurses quickly realize that it takes a lot of work on yourself to be able to show up, to actually be able to be there for someone and help someone. So we know this from our own lives too, and we've heard the saying a million times, you have to fill your cup before you can pour to others, put your oxygen mask on first, these things. I knew all this. I learned it in school. What quickly happened after about 2 years in nursing, the thing that really got to me the most was the shift work, the night shifts, the long hours, 13, 14-hour days, the no breaks for 12 and a half hours, the not using the bathroom until the last hour of your shift because you're so busy. It's an area that I think people think they know what nurses do, but it's actually such a thankless profession sometimes. And I'm here for it. I'm all for, giving to others, but you need to get something back from your job, something more than just a paycheck.
I think nurses are the unsung heroes.
Yeah.
I think what happens is nurses do so much, but as soon as the doctor comes in, and this is not to discredit the doctors, but the doctors get all the credit and the nurses just keep on working. And I actually think that nurses don't get as much credit as they deserve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a bit of a misunderstood profession too about how knowledgeable nurses really are and how they are the eyes and the ears for the families and the patients. And I loved being with my patients. So in the time that I'm with someone, I loved everything about my job. As soon as I stepped away and I had to deal with the politics, the discussions around money. There's a lot of money discussions in healthcare, and I'm not about money in healthcare. Even though we're a public sector, it's all about the dollar. And it just kind of got to me. The shift worked mostly also because my body was just not doing well. Especially as females, we're cyclical. Females are very cyclical in both our menstrual cycles and also our energy. And what shift work does to any human is it actually takes 7 years off of your lifespan because the sleep deprivation and the side effects of not getting cyclical proper rest in like a normal circadian rhythm is like one of the worst things you can do for your body. So nurses get shift premiums when they work night shift. And honestly, it's not worth it. And I give so much credit to the nurses who still do it. Someone has to do it, and we need to also understand that. But I started just realizing that it was not serving my body. I literally felt like I didn't sleep for 2.5 years because the times when I was trying to get into a normal daytime routine, my body was in night mode. And, there's not enough melatonin, Gravol, sleep mask, lavender essential oils, and bubble baths that can get you to go to bed when your body's messed up. So it actually took me developing severe physical ailments of burnout. Now, burnout's a sexy word. We hear about it all the time, but I don't think people really know what it actually means. It's one thing to be exhausted mentally and burnt out that way, but I started developing actually physical symptoms. So a condition called adrenal fatigue, which we've also probably heard about, where your adrenals are literally so stressed from high cortisol in your blood that you basically are never relaxed. Even when you are relaxing, your body's just at like high capacity functioning, doing things that you're trying to let it calm down. I developed a thyroid condition. My hair was falling out. I was losing weight, gaining weight. My hormones were all out of whack. I was suffering just from like severe irritability, just from not sleeping. I was like snapping on people and it just like not my best self. And then coupled with the fact, as I mentioned earlier, I was over exercising a lot of HIIT, a lot of cardio. I'd actually go to the gym. My break was like 3 to 4 a.m. and I'd go to the gym.
Wow.
And I would go like work out. And that's like the worst time to work out. Mind you, my body kind of thought it was 3 p.m., but not really because you're looking at artificial light for the whole night. And I basically just hit a wall. Like I literally at one day, I remember just thinking like, I cannot go on feeling this way. Like this cannot be all there is to my career. Like I knew going in it was going to be tough, but I had no idea. You really don't know till you have to do it, what it does to your body. Some nights I'd be cycling home. I cycle to work and I wouldn't even remember how I got home because the memory loss from sleep deprivation is equivalent as like drinking some ridiculous amount of drinks. And then you have nurses working on patients and it's pretty freaky when you think about it. People who, aren't feeling the greatest up at odd hours of the night. Someone's got to do it. And unfortunately, at the end, it just wasn't for me.
So how did you have the courage to say, okay, well, because, being a nurse is a nice job. It's comfortable.
Yeah.
Good pay.
Mm-hmm.
Our families kind of say, go to school, get a job, work 9 to 5. You had the courage to say, no, mom, dad, I'm going to step away from this comfortable job.
Yeah.
I'm going to go into this direction. And that alone takes a lot of courage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very important because sometimes our listeners are listening and we need to also inspire them because sometimes they're in the same situation, maybe not as a nurse, but working 9 to 5 in an office, working in a cubicle. But they're like, I want to do something better for myself, but they don't have the courage to actually admit it and say it out loud. Where did you find that courage?
I mentioned earlier, it was a broken arm. So I actually thought about it. There's got to be something else, toying with the fact that I didn't like what I was doing. And I'm a firm believer that if you don't listen to those tugs, that something's going to force you to pivot. It's going to force you to find an area that you love and an area that fills up your cup a little bit more. So I was actually rollerblading and I fell and I broke my arm. And you can't work as a nurse with one arm. So I was basically forced to take time and figure out what was next. 2 months off work. I can't work with a cast because it's an infection issue. I also can't use one hand to do anything. So I'm a firm believer that the universe literally decided if you're not going to listen, we're going to make you listen. So it was 2 months of sleeping. And that's all I needed to realize that I cannot go back to that. And I walked into my job. I basically asked the universe for some sort of opportunity. And it was so crazy because my dream job fell into my lap. And it was a 8-hour shift, no night shifts in a clinic, which is where I am now. I'm now a fertility nurse. I left the hospital, which was scary. And you mentioned, leaving something that's stable. I went from being a full-time nurse and took a position as a part-time nurse, which meant a big pay cut. Which also meant the loss of benefits, which also meant I actually broke my arm 11 months later for a second time. And that time I was off work with no benefits. So the thing with making these decisions, you have to also weigh out, like, is this worth leaving something? And it's not always a financial decision. I'm a firm believer that money will come in other ways. You really have to focus on you. And my parents were a little nervous because
100%.
it sounds really great on paper to be a full-time nurse and have a pension and all these things, benefits, and, but at the end of the day, it was a decision I made for me. And the 2 months off work was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I really just realized that it was just the best decision to go into something that was more conducive to health. If I'm going to promote health, I need to take care of myself.
Awesome. So you mentioned that you broke your arm, and it was kind of like a godsend in some sort of way. But what other changes did you have to make for your hours to be flexible enough to pursue something you love? And what would you say your biggest challenge was?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I took a position that was just by nature less hours. So what that, two things. It forced me, one, to think of, okay, there's other ways I need to make money, because at the end of the day, a pay cut's a pay cut, and we live in downtown Toronto. It's very expensive. So I had more space, and that, I think, was the biggest thing for me, is that when you step away from something and take a little less on, my whole concept of do less, it gives you this chunk of time that you never had, that you can kind of go, okay, so this is what I have, and what is it that I feel inclined to fill this with? Because I basically cut my hours in half every week at work. So for me, it wasn't so much about like asking on how I could flex hours or anything like that. It was just a different contract, less hours. I know a lot of people that work 9 to 5. There's a lot of options if you approach your boss and say, can I work from home one day? Can we flex hours? Can I work like a 4-day work week, longer day, something like that? I basically just knew that I needed to work less in my career to transition into things that I love doing more. And if it wasn't for doing that, I definitely wouldn't have been able to fit teaching fitness into my lifestyle, because there's a lot of talk about the side hustle right now. It's very sexy. I don't know if you guys agree. And a lot of people think that it's just about adding on to your full-time gig. And it's just about adding something on the side and building this massive empire so that you can just ditch your 9 to 5. And while that does work for a lot of people, I was kind of stuck in that mindset, because at the time of being a full-time nurse, I was trying to build businesses. I was trying to do this side hustle thing as an escape. And all it got me was more burnt out, because there's only so many hours. I don't care what anyone says. There's literally only so many hours on the clock. So if you're adding something, you're taking away from something. So that's generally people's health and their sleep and things that are important to them, like their relationships with others. So I always say to people, maybe the narrative needs to change a bit. Maybe we say, instead of a side hustle, can we flex our hours in what we're doing and just create a little more space? And you'd be amazed what space can do for your life. It gives you clarity. It gives you time to just sit with like what you want to do. And then you can explore what that space is filled with. And for me, it became filled with fitness. It became filled with something I started called prescription self-care, which was basically just sharing all the lessons I learned over a year of transitioning into part-time work and doing side projects on how to take care of yourself more. And the discussions that we are having more of now, but a few years ago, it wasn't so big. Self-care wasn't really so much a thing 3-4 years ago. And a lot of people think it takes money, but sometimes it just takes saying to your boss, okay, I need a mental health day. I need like 8 hours off today to just chill and like regroup. And it's hard to do that, especially if you're worried about finances. But my best advice is just explore what your job can do for you, and don't be afraid to ask for what you need out of your job. And if you can't get what you need, it's just a job. And there's a lot of jobs out there. And I don't ever want someone to stay in a job that they hate because their parents think they should, or because it's like, oh, it has benefits or a pension. There's a lot of ways to make money.
What about someone who doesn't have that option? What can you advise them? Like what tools can you give that person that is not necessarily stuck in a job, but it's just their life circumstances don't allow them to get that same flexibility that you just spoke of? Mm-hmm. What can that individual do for themselves in order to have coping mechanisms or tools they can use to not get to that level of burnout or deteriorate their physical and mental health?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is you can write a prescription, and this is why I called this movement that I started Prescription Self-Care. It was the prescription that I needed, was someone to tell me, you can take all the supplements in the world and do all the things that everyone says, but at the end of the day, you need to sit and listen to what works for your body. So my best advice for people, if it comes down to self-care, number one, and always number one over anything else, the one that no one wants to admit they're really bad at, sleep. Sleep is like the foundation of wellness that I think it's just tend to, be missed. When you're sleeping well, you can have more clarity about, what's going to go on in the next day or what you have to focus on or the goals that you have. That's like number one for anything. And I just feel too that the thing that sometimes we don't talk about in wellness is, and something I'm trying to learn more about too, is productivity hacks. Like if someone's like, okay, I need to get X, Y, and Z done. And I really urge my friends to look at where are you spending time that's not feeling good, and how can you cut things out of that? So instead of doing more, how can you get rid of some stuff in your life that you don't like doing to make space to add something in?
I'm going to jump on there. So I agree with you 1,000%, but I don't think enough people spend time with themselves to figure out what's going to make them happy.
Yeah.
We're too quick pointing the finger out. I tell people, take that finger and turn it in.
Yeah.
Focus on you. It's just like relationships. Someone else cannot make you happy.
Mm-hmm.
You have to figure out what makes you happy and let that person add to that happiness. You can't find someone that's going to, this person makes me happy. That is not sustainable at all. But I want to bring you back a couple of questions ago, because you brought something up and it's very important that we touch on it. You said you were going to the gym and you were really skinny.
Mm-hmm.
So outside you looked healthy,
mm-hmm.
but inside you were a mess. And us going into the new year and everyone's New Year's resolution, all you're seeing is fitness ads everywhere. And it's a lot about people that are really big, lose 20 pounds. But I think there's a misconception that just because you're skinny doesn't mean that you're healthy.
Yeah.
And I want you to touch on that for the viewers, because there are viewers out here that are listening that might not be big, might be skinny, but might not be healthy. Maybe some tips on what they need to do to kind of get their ball rolling.
Yeah. I know that there was a bit of a movement that was going on a couple years ago about this, and it's a movement called Strong, Not Skinny.
Yeah, I heard about that.
So I have a very controversial view about that.
Bring it on.
And while I understand the point of saying we should be encouraging women to be strong and not focus on being skinny, I agree in that regard. The issue I have is that we're saying this, not that. It's like something is wrong with being skinny. And something I faced my whole life was being naturally skinny. And I actually got teased about it as a kid, which some people might kind of roll their eyes at and say, well, big deal. But as a kid, I was an athlete my whole life, and I could never gain weight. I could never get a muscle to save my life.
Andre, me, I look like a Q-tip.
There you go.
You know what I mean? Men suffer with it a lot.
Yeah.
Like a girl would touch my arm, Mel. I would try so hard to flex.
Yeah.
But there'll be nothing there, right?
He's pretty strong right now.
Right, yeah. I got some push-ups, girl. Did my push-ups. But before, men suffer with trying to gain weight just as much as women.
Yeah.
Maybe even sometimes worse.
Mm-hmm.
But we never talk. I think a lot of men suffer in silence.
Yes, I agree.
But one point I want to touch on, and it's very important, very relevant, and very current, which is this the court of public opinion. You just spoke about if one thing is right, it means the other thing is wrong. Things can't coexist, especially in this world of social media. Like you said, if someone is talking about someone's weight or something, it's fat shaming, and they're just skinny shaming. There's this, there's that. There's so many rules, but the people making the rules, they're changing them every single day. But so I want to touch on that point that you said that, someone can be skinny and that's okay. Someone can be fit or strong and that's okay. Whatever it is that makes them happy and healthy, that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. So you care to touch on that a little bit more?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. When I was, at my worst in terms of my health, and I mentioned I had all these physical ailments, I looked skinny. which like a lot of people, they would say, I would kill to have your body. I used to get that all the time. Like, I'd kill to have your body. And I'm like, I'm so unhealthy right now. I'm like trying to heal my body. I'm not in a good place. And I'd get comments from family members when I was younger, like, oh, you're not from this family. Like, you're too skinny for this family. And it's kind of like, well, here we are. And what I started to notice, and I agree with the point too, it's we're so quick to label things and we're so quick to make others wrong. And what ended up happening is I used to be obsessed with the scale. That's a common problem with a lot of people too. And the scale is a lie. It's such a lie, because if you were to compare, I actually gained 40 pounds, but my size didn't change necessarily in my body.
So you're 40 pounds heavier right today than you really?
Yeah, because I was just zero muscle. Like, I was like so thin. And then when I started changing my workouts and I started focusing more on strength and fixing ailments that I was having, my digestive system, and like just recalibrating my body, I like basically overhauled my health by fixing my sleep and basically filling my cup and like finding what I like to do in my soul. I feel like that can cure many physical ailments, and that's a whole other conversation. But I actually gained weight. And if I was to have focused on the scale through that transition, I would have been a mental wreck, because that, for women, we associate that number with worth and with significance. And the higher that number, many people's worth goes the opposite way, because we think that being heavier makes us less worthy, often of love, which is a very deep conversation about it, but it's very real. And so if I was to actually look at my body in, side-by-side pictures, which I don't even do because I'm not a fan of before and afters a whole lot either. But if I was to do that, I don't really look that much different. But the composition of like my body itself, I'm strong. I was not strong before. And I was so prone to injury because the strength in my body was weak, and I was doing high impact workouts, which put a lot of stress on your joints. And if you're not moving safely and moving effectively and knowing how to move, that poses a lot of problems. So it's hard. It's hard also on social media, as you mentioned, because everyone has an opinion.
Well, look at the situation with Adele. Over the holidays, she went to, I guess, some holiday parties in Hollywood or wherever she was. And it looked like she lost like 60 to 100 pounds, whatever it is that she lost. And she's super slim. But then the pendulum swung the other way. Now everybody's kind of attacking her for being too skinny. For, she looks anorexic. She looks whatever. Like, there's so many negative comments. And I'm like,
can you pull up the picture of that?
The picture of it, I can definitely pull it up and try to show you guys on my laptop here. But the whole point I'm trying to make is that you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Totally.
And it's so toxic and so dangerous, right? Like, you don't know the reasons. Like, she could have an illness. It might not have been fitness related. Like, it's so dangerous in this world that people are so quick to judge, so quick to give their opinion, so quick to impose their view on everybody else. And it goes back to what you said, Declan, which is everyone loves to point the finger. It's so easy, but no one wants to look intrinsically. You know why? Because it's not fun sometimes. It's hard. It's hard to look at yourself, right? It's easy to point at someone else and point out all their issues, whether positive or negative, than to look inward and kind of look at yourself, right? And this is kind of the premise behind this platform that we've created with Zenboks, is we want to empower people to invest more time in themselves, right? We want people to learn to love their body, want them to learn to center their mind and to find their purpose in life, right? If you're strong physically, strong mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and you have a purpose in life, to me, that's a recipe for happiness.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to take away these barriers that people put up, right? By utilizing a tool that we already have to our disposal, which is a phone or any mobile device that plays videos. And on the app, we have practitioners from different disciplines, from fitness all the way to therapy and life coaching. These are all elements that we can utilize, right? And earlier you're speaking about how, making these transitions in life can sometimes be expensive and people might not have like the benefits or anything like that. So what we did was we took, a therapy session, we took a life coach, personal trainer, fitness coach, nutritionist, and we put them all in an app. And the monthly charge for it is the same as like a Netflix, something that we utilize every single day. Almost everybody I know, like 9 out of 10 people have Netflix, right? But then you ask them like, well, what are you really getting out of it? Like, how you're investing a lot of time watching shows, but what are you getting? What's the return
Nobody
on
wants
that
to invest in
investment?
themselves.
Right.
Because it takes courage to say, I'm not happy. I need to do better for me.
Right.
People, I feel today, we prefer to be a self-sabotager than a self-motivator. Sadly. Unless you're surrounded by a great group of people who could help push you in the right direction. So it's about trying to figure out, because I believe birds of a feather flock together. So if you're carrying a wagon up a hill and everyone in that wagon is sitting in that wagon, not have one leg out helping you push that wagon up, but you have to reassess the people you're surrounded with. Because sometimes those people could be holding you back. So, Mel, we'll talk a little bit more about the class. Like, what type of people were in the class? Was it all females?
Yeah, I would say a good chunk of it was females, maybe 1 or 2 men in the class. It was 45 minutes. We're in a hot room, so it's about anywhere between 30 and 40 degrees in there. Simple equipment, just 1-2 pound weights, and just basically your body. We did go along with the music in the class. And like Steph said, we did not put the weights down the entire time, but we worked different muscle groups. And I just found that what I loved about it was I was working muscles that I've never worked before. So I found that that's why it was so challenging for me, because I'm just so used to picking up a weight and doing a squat or just doing a tricep pull or something along those lines. And there's something so beautiful to just pulse for about a minute and your arms are about to fall off. So that's all about the class, and Steph just walks you through it, makes it a lot more enjoyable, obviously. And it was just so much fun.
And you were sweating from the top to the bottom.
Oh yeah. Even though you're basically working your arms and core, you're just full body sweat.
What did that do for you? Because you're a super busy woman. On top of your amazing career, you're also been helping me out with the development and the launch of this app. So I know how hard you work, and I know how many hours you spend just with your work. But then you also spend a lot of time with your fitness routine and your self-care routine. So what would you say, like, jumping into Steph's class, what does that do for you at the end of your day or at the start of your day?
So making sure I put aside at least an hour or 2 a day to work out is my form of self-care. Because if I don't do that, I just find that I don't have a good day. My whole mentality, my whole mood, completely off. So my morning routine, I wake up, immediately go to the gym. I don't look at my email. I don't go on my phone. I just wake up, wash up, go to the gym, whether it be go to Bolo or just to the gym downstairs. So for me, getting into Steph's class and doing a morning routine type of workout, that just makes me feel like I'm totally ready for my day. I'm fully energized. I feel by the time I get to work, I've already been up for 4 hours. I did a full workout and I'm just ready to crush whatever the day has to throw at me. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what working out and attending Steph's class was like for me on that particular day.
And what do you like? Do you feel like that helps your productivity? Because you mentioned something about being up for 4 hours before you even opened a piece of work. Because like I feel like there's a lot of people, especially in like an urban setting that are like in zombie mode. You know, you wake up and within an hour of being up, you had your coffee to like jumpstart your system and you're right into it. So do you feel like your approach of getting up a little earlier and, you know, going through your routine, by the time you get to your first meeting, your first call, your first email open, did you feel you're sharper? Do you feel your performance is elevated?
1,000%. I think that mental clarity is there. If you even just, you don't even have to go to the gym. If you just wake up an hour earlier just to focus on yourself, whether that be meditating or just taking a shower and washing your face. I can't even believe the amount of people that I see on a day-to-day basis that when I go to work, they're just kind of waking up. And like I mentioned, I've been up for 4 hours. So I am full of energy, ready to go. A lot of the time, people are just yawning. Let me go get a coffee. I need to wake up a little bit. I think having a self-care routine on a day-to-day basis really will help with your productivity, mental clarity, and just your entire mood in general.
Steph,
Yeah.
what did you find the major difference, and maybe one person in particular, when you found happiness within yourself? What relationship changed the most?
Oh, that's a tough one.
That's why we're here. That's why we're out here.
Yeah. Something I haven't talked about a lot on social, and I'm pretty open on social in general. I really like sharing the things I've learned in life because I think that's the whole point. That the reason I'm here is to spread that wisdom. But something that happened to me in Costa Rica, specifically when I went on that trip, it was a 10-day trip. It was my first solo trip I ever went on. That was like a pivotal moment next to breaking my arm that was really transformational. It was time away that I needed. And I've mentioned it a lot tonight. You need space, you need time, maybe not necessarily away, you don't have to go to Costa Rica, but you need space and time with yourself. Something, we've talked about is hard to do, to sit and listen to yourself and your thoughts. But what I left with Costa Rica, after I had left, I had just realized that there was a lot in my life that I was holding on to in fear. Jobs, people, relationships, namely a 5-year relationship that I was in with my partner at the time. Unfortunately, it was a relationship I was ignoring that was no longer serving me. And I think what happens when you start to fill yourself from the inside, you get the courage to really realize that there's things on the outside that you really don't need and that aren't serving you. And you get the courage to just walk away from those things with grace, knowing that you're so filled up that none of that matters if you leave it. So
you don't need this relationship.
Yeah. Or the job.
Or
like,
the job.
And I'm also, I want to preface this by saying, I don't recommend anyone just quits their job and leaves themselves in a financial position that is not safe. Please, I have zero financial experience. But, I think when you start to really get to know yourself, which is freaking terrifying, like, holy crap. When you start to listen to what's actually going on between your ears, it can be very overwhelming. And something that I didn't mention tonight, but I think that's worth knowing, is I wasn't always in this mindset. I used to be a severe control freak. I used to be tightly gripping onto things because I was so scared of failing or letting someone down. I think we can all relate to that. I was so living in a scarcity mindset. And what I mean by that is the thoughts that would go through my head is there's not enough money, there's not enough time, there's not enough love in my life, there's not enough people that support me. I had not a lot of gratitude for the things that I had. So walking into a job every day, if that was me now in that job, I think I would feel very differently about it. But at the time, it was just such a scarcity mindset that was around me because I wasn't happy with myself. And I think that if we're not happy with ourselves, it's really hard to see the things that we have that's going for us, that's good. So, it really gave me courage when I really did fill up my cup to say, like, I'm going to create boundaries with people in my life that no longer serve me. And I think single-handedly the most important part of our lives is the relationships and the company that we keep with ourselves and with the people that we spend the most time with. That also caused me to trickle that down into creating very difficult to make boundaries with family members that were very toxic, with friends that were just not aligned with what I started to believe in, because I kind of went on this exponential growth curve that sometimes causes you to realize that there's just people you can't bring up with you. There's people that unfortunately, as you elevate, aren't going to elevate at the same rate or maybe at all. And it's not to say there's anything wrong with them. And I think that's the area that boundary setting can be the most difficult, is to lay blame and point fingers, like we said, and say, well, this person's not at my level, so like they're no longer good for me. And that's not really what it's about. It's really just understanding that as you elevate and you're, just vibing at a different level, you have to also elevate the people that you're with, because that's, the 5 people we spend the most time with are who we become. And if you look around and you don't like those 5 people, then you got to get a new circle, because it's really difficult to enhance and personally develop if the people around you aren't doing the same.
So for our listeners, what would be your top 3 tips to begin creating flexible hours for themselves?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because it really depends on the place that you're coming from and what your lifestyle looks like. As I mentioned, I think the biggest thing is I recommend to anyone is to sit down and get clear on why. Like, why is it that you want flexible hours? Does it just sound sexy to say I want to go live on a beach and work from my laptop? I think that all sounds great to everyone. But I think at the same time, you need to understand that what does flexibility mean to you? And I think for me, a lot of the time when we ask these questions of why, we need to focus on the feeling. So how do we want to feel? Is it that right now we're anxious and we feel like we're not doing anything we like and that we don't really like the people we're surrounding ourselves with, and, we want more time? And it really goes back to the feeling. Like for me, I wanted flexible hours because I wanted to feel more in control. And I wanted to feel like I could decide, this is what I want to do with my time, instead of someone else telling me what to do with my time and my value and how much I'm worth. So the biggest thing first is just get clear on why and write down how you want to feel and what do you want life to feel like? I think that's like a big question that we don't ask ourselves a lot because we're so focused on doing. What do we want to do? The goals we want to set, all these accomplishments. And it's that time of year, everyone's setting resolutions, but maybe the resolutions we need to set are, I want to feel strong. I want to feel healthy. I want to feel well rested when I wake up and go to work. Feeling is huge. The second thing is just brainstorm ideas on what you love to do. They say that if you're doing something you love, you never work a day in your life. And I think that's totally not true, because that's a controversial topic also. But I think that things are going to take work. No matter what you're doing, even if you love the heck out of it, you're still going to need to put in work. It's just going to feel different because it's more aligned. And what happens when you get more aligned into things you want to do is there's just a little bit less resistance. So it feels a little bit easier because you're not resisting against something that you hate doing. So it's just that the path has become a little clearer and you can navigate through that with a different feeling. So brainstorming things that you love doing. And for some people, maybe it's getting a certification. I've had so many people message me asking me, like, how do you fit teaching classes into your nursing schedule? And a lot of people are surprised to hear that I don't work full-time hours. And that's the boundary that I've set for myself because I know my limit. And I know that if I work too much in my career, that's going to take away from my fitness job. And if I work too much in fitness, I'm going to be exhausted and not be a good nurse. So it's really like sitting down.
It's a balancing act.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And balance, also a word I don't really believe in at all, actually. I think it's a word that is so unrealistic. You're never going to balance your life. Like there's so many moving parts of life. And as cyclical humans, it's not a linear curve. Like life's not linear. It's really about the ups and the downs. And sometimes if you're down, if you're sick, you're going to need a lot more sleep. If you're feeling top performance, eating so good, sleeping good, you can push it in the gym more. So it's not this like linear balancing act. It really is like push and a pull. And one of the biggest words that has been monumental, and it's a tattoo I have on my arm, is flow, and just like riding the waves because it's always going to be changing. Like life is never going to be the same day to day. And I know for me, if life is the same day to day, I'm bored and I need out. So
I'm going to bring you back for a second because there's something you said and it's a little tricky. So sometimes, because we hear a lot of people that are going through this now. You know, I've worked on me. Now, Andre, I've developed myself. We can't be friends anymore.
mm-hmm.
He's not at my level. But Andre, I've known since we were in elementary school. Does that mean he's not at my level? I should cut him out of my life, or do I have to spend different time with him? Because I find that sometimes we're cutting people out, and then in 2 years, it's like, oh, I want that friend back. They actually really knew me.
Mm-hmm.
But we're so quick because this is like the new theme. I'm grown. You're not at my level. I'm going to stay in this lane. But you love me. We grew up together. The people who I'm hanging out with now, they just know the new me.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know the whole me. Can you touch on that a little bit? Because I think it's very important for our listeners to hear.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I went through this in my previous relationship because that's exactly what happened. And I struggled with it. It kind of goes back to also your ego. Like personal development can inflate the crap out of your ego. It can really put you into a place where you feel like you're better than everyone. And I've definitely been there. I've definitely been in that place where I've thought, okay, I think differently than people. I speak differently than people. I like different things than all these people that are around me. And I think that a lot of personal growth, something that people don't talk about, is you go so inward and you develop yourself so much that you actually start to feel really lonely because you start to look around and say, I don't feel like I can identify or relate to the people or the conversations that are happening around me. And I started to notice this when, you know, the culture in university was drink a bunch, party a bunch. And I got into it and I realized like this is not serving my best self. But the culture of the company that's around you is so easily to get into, you know, peer pressure as a teenager. We've all been there. I think it's really hard to set boundaries, especially with long-term friends. But I think what you'll notice happens as you develop yourself is that people will just naturally drift off that aren't meant to be near you. And I'm a huge believer that people that are meant to be in your life, even if you lose touch, will come back. Always. Anything that's meant for you will find its way back. Relationships, friends, money, whatever. So I don't necessarily think it needs to be a conscious decision to just like cut. Now, that being said, something that I think a lot of people need to decipher from that conversation is there's people that are very toxic. And sometimes you don't realize it in the moment when you're at a different level because your worth is less. So you can't recognize that this person isn't good for me because you yourself don't feel good. So when you kind of shift into I feel good, and a conversation we had before, like I feel good, and now I can recognize that that person is in fact detrimental to my mental health. And I had to do this with my father, who was just at the time that I set this boundary, the biggest stressor in my life and the most toxic person. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done. The person that I like, one of the people that I love the most in my life. But you need to really understand the impact that people have on you. And I don't think that for a lot of people, that self-awareness is there to realize after I leave that conversation, I actually don't feel good if I talk to that person. Like I'm feeling drained. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling hurt. I'm feeling disappointed. And if that's happening every time with that person, like you really need to evaluate what is the return on investment. Just like if you're giving someone money to pay for something and getting something in return, if you're spending time with someone and all they're doing is draining your energy bank, you know, relationships are a give and take. And as a natural healer and someone that's very intuitive, I have to protect my energy a lot. And I have to be very mindful how much I give, because natural healers attract people that naturally need healing. So you have oftentimes
attract hurt people.
Yeah.
The opposite, yeah.
And you oftentimes have people coming to you for advice. I'm I pride myself on being a giver of everything I've learned, but at some degree, you need to also understand that that's an energy exchange. And filling your cup is a daily thing that needs to be done. It's not a once a week self-care night, bubble bath and watch a cute movie. It's like a daily commitment, just like fitness, just like eating well. It's a daily choice to say, my health is the number one priority, mental, physical, spiritual, whatever area we want to talk about, financial, an area that we don't talk a lot about. It's all health. And you need to, commit to yourself every day, and then you commit to other people with what's left. Right? Because it takes work to work on yourself too. It takes energy. So, the pendulum goes both ways. If you work on yourself too much and isolate yourself from all your friends, you have a problem. If you don't listen to yourself at all and become so disconnected to your body and your mind, then you also have a problem. So again, knowing when to push and pull and knowing when you need to take a step back, and if that means cutting out friends or not going to that event because you're drained, or recognizing that, you just can't do it today, and that's okay.
This is a perfect time for me to ask my next question. I've been meaning to ask this for the last 15 minutes.
Sorry.
No. Like it's, but I feel like this is a perfect segue. And I would like to challenge not only your thought, Steph, but I would like to challenge everyone at this table right now. Is if I was like an independent individual with, not knowing anybody at this table and just listening to this show for the first time, and trying to have a takeaway, a positive, negative, whatever takeaway, how would I be able to answer somebody that would feel or take away that, investing in yourself and prioritizing yourself sounds extremely selfish, like extremely selfish. And how does someone cope with that? Because that's sometimes people's roadblock. That's their first barrier, is like, that sounds selfish as hell. I don't want to do that. I don't want to cut people out. Like when you use the term like this person doesn't serve me, it's like, what do they owe me? Like that's how I look at that sometimes. It's like, they don't owe me anything. Like a friendship is an equal exchange. Like people don't need to serve me. Like, so I'm just trying to kind of look at it from the other side, is challenging everybody at this table. How do we take care of ourselves? How do we invest more time in ourselves and not feel like the people in our lives are pawns? They're extras. We're the star, right? And everybody else is there to make sure that we look good in the movie of our life.
Before we get to answering that question, I just want to say thank you for asking that, because I was just going to ask that question. But I also want to add on to it. I think what we also need to verbalize tonight is, how do we communicate self-love, or we're focusing on our mental health or our self-health to our friends and family without, like Andre just mentioned, sounding selfish. I feel like being able to communicate is the hardest part, because half the time a lot of people just go ghost, and they just don't want to answer to anyone because they don't know how to. So I feel like one of the biggest questions here is, how do we communicate that we're just trying to focus on ourselves at the moment without sounding like, I want you out of my life.
Yeah, and this is super important, because like life isn't as easy as, practitioners, health experts, life coaches, motivational speakers can sometimes put it in this romantic package of like, if you are able to follow these steps that I give you, you're going to be happy, you're going to see progress, you're going to elevate yourself. But at the same time, though, like if we're eliminating all of these parts of ourselves, at the end of that journey, are we really going to recognize that person in the mirror? That to me is like a question that was my takeaway from this entire conversation, as I was listening and I was taking in what you were saying. And I was like, that's a great tool. That's a great tool. But at the same time, I'm like looking at the other side of the coin. And I know this is a very hard question to answer towards the end of our conversation, but I feel like this is extremely important because we don't want to be so one-sided in a discussion. We want to look at the other side as well and make it a more holistic conversation.
Yeah, a couple moving parts. I'm going to try to touch on all of them. First thing, I talked a lot about stripping things away. I have this analogy. I work in analogies. It's just how my brain thinks. I'm not sure why that is, but it is how it is. Life, or you, or however you want to look at this, is an onion. And what tends to happen, I find, through life, and it starts in childhood, our perception of ourself gets very clouded by the external world and expectations of others, society, just influence from everything around us, that we build up this like outer shell that really isn't who we are. I think a lot of people go through this moment in life where they like look at themselves and they're like, this is not who I want to be. And what I mean by everything I was saying tonight is just kind of peeling back these layers of expectations that we put on ourselves, of society, of our parents, of people around us, and kind of getting to like who we are as a core. And who we want to be and what that means to us. And it's not necessarily about getting rid of everything in your life and like moving to a beach and living there for a year and having, nothing to think about. But it really is, for me personally, peeling everything back and like going deep inside and really saying like, okay, like who is Steph? Because everyone around me my whole life has told me who I should be and what I should do. And, I've shown up in relationships as who I think I should be for that person, or in a friendship of who that person needs me to be. But are you stepping into that conversation with that friend like as who you want to be and not who they need you to be? As someone that likes to give to people, I oftentimes would find myself sacrificing who I was or what I actually wanted to say, because I wanted to show up in a way that they needed, or how they liked me, or how they thought I was. And the best question I ever was forced to ask the people in my life through a course I did was, who am I to you? And it was like mind-blowing, because the things that people think of you are not often what you think of yourself. So, for example, one girl said to me, and I'll never forget it, "You're super creative." And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm not creative at all. I'm a science brain. I come from medicine. I zero creativity. This was maybe like 3-4 years ago. And when she said that, I was like, no, that's not me. And then I thought about it, and I like opened myself up to this whole new realm of possibility of being creative, just because someone saw that in me and I didn't see that for myself. So then I started randomly picking up creative hobbies like painting bowls. It's super random, but it became something that I love doing. And I identified with a new version of myself that someone else saw in me that I never unlocked, because I never let myself be creative, because I told myself I'm a nurse and I'm a science-focused brain type. I like put myself in this box. So it goes both ways. People will recognize things in you that you don't recognize in yourself. And people are never going to know you like you know yourself, because we put on face for certain people. To give you another example, I'm a Cancer sign. I'm huge into astrology. It's who I am through and through. I love the home. I love family. I'm very empathetic. I'm an extrovert, but I recharge by being with myself. But a lot of people don't know there's actually 2 other signs in astrology. So one of them is a sun sign. So I'm a Leo sun sign. And your sun sign is how you show up to the world and how people know you. And Leos are very much like fiery, outgoing, generally in leadership roles or entrepreneurial roles. So that just goes to show you that who I am deep down isn't necessarily who I always am. Doesn't mean I'm inauthentic. It just means there's different parts of Steph that come out in different areas.
So I'm just going to touch on one part of your question. I believe it was talking about how not to be selfish.
Mm.
So I think there's one word that we all kind of forgot today. No matter what we're doing, whether it be improving yourself, improving relationships, whatever it is, consistency is a very important word. because we can all be like one-hit wonders, like Vanilla Ice. But consistency is what truly makes greatness. And we talked about selfishness. So for me, I just want to talk about something personal. And I think a lot of people have gone through this, where I was that guy where I'd be out and let's say a group of guys, because guys all get together and they'll start making fun of me. And I would start laughing with them like, oh, cool. But I thought it was okay to laugh at myself. But as soon as I started to be selfish and put myself first, I lost those friends. Because all I did was say, no, I don't want to be made fun of. I don't want to be the joke of the group anymore. And I think it's okay to be selfish when you're doing for yourself. Now, if you're doing for yourself in a malicious way, that's a completely different conversation. But I think to get to the point of the things that Steph has talked about today, you need a bit of selfishness. And you are going to lose people along the way. That is going to happen. But the people who truly love you will be there with you. Because the ones that truly love you, for me, were the guys that was like, say to me, Declan, you can stand up for yourself. You don't have to be laughing at the joke about yourself. And those friends are still my friends today. So I do think in the journey of growth within you, I think a bit of selfishness is okay. To answer your question. I feel like we're at that point, I think that's a great point to conclude tonight. I want to finish off on one quick question for you, Steph. Mm-hmm. For the people listening that want to make a career shift to pursue something that they love, what is your one biggest piece of advice?
Find the space, whether that be sitting down for an hour and mapping it out on what you actually want to do. Drown out the noise of everyone around you, the influences that you see on social media and all the cool careers that people have, and really sit down and just understand, what it is that you want to feel in life and what's in alignment with those feelings. And career shifts are scary. They're terrifying. And as you heard in my story tonight, if you don't listen to the tugs and the intuition and the things that keep popping up in all these little messages, if you really start to get off your phone and slow down and just like pay attention to life, you're going to notice signs and little just nudges. Longer you ignore them, the louder they're going to get. And then eventually something is going to happen that's going to force you to really wake up. And unfortunately, when that something happens, it's too late. Like sometimes that means losing that job or breaking that arm or, something that's very monumental in your life. And oftentimes we don't prepare for that impact. So planning now and just like really being clear on what it is that you want to feel in your life. Focus on the feeling and the rest of it will come.
Melissa, any last words?
I think let's put aside some time, whether it be today, tomorrow, next week, to really take into consideration what Steph just said. What do you want to do? I think that's the number one question that everyone needs to kind of sit back and answer for themselves. But other than that, I think this has been such a great conversation. And thank you so much
no problem. Thanks for having me.
Coming in tonight.
Andre?
Yeah, for me, it was I learned a lot from you today, Steph. Thanks again for coming in here and having this conversation with us. I feel like we touched on a lot of things that are very important. We touched on a lot of things that are going to connect with a lot of our listeners. And I feel like everybody that's listening is going to take away something from not only your personal stories about your personal life, but your career, some of the choices that you've made, some of the advice that you've given us tonight, and the strength that you showed, right? That strength that you showed I feel like that's going to inspire a lot of people to look inward and reconnect with themselves and start to transition into investing more time in themselves and their personal development and elevating themselves to the next stage of their life without feeling guilty, without feeling selfish, and at times maybe needing to be a little bit selfish, as we touched on, and not looking at it that way. Just being more assertive, I guess, is the word we should use. So I think this was an amazing conversation, and hopefully in the future we get to have more conversations like this.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm just going to leave everybody with saying that continue to invest more time in your own personal development and self-elevation. And
download Zenboks.
Download Zenboks on the App Store.
So Steph, for me personally, I just want to say as a host, you made my job really easy today. Thank you so much. And I thank you so much for sharing that story with your father, because I think it takes a lot of courage to open up about that personal father-daughter relationship. And for you to have the courage to tell our listeners, like, I had to cut this person out. Thank you for that. So Mel and I we did this outro. I'm going to read out this outro right now. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and discussing the importance of self-care, creating flexible hours to be able to do all the things you love without sacrificing sleep, health, and relationships. I read that now, but after I listen to our discussion, I'm actually going to change everything. And it's going to go a little bit more like this. Thank you so much for joining us for this evening's discussion on the importance of putting yourself first, having the courage, I repeat, having the courage to realize that you can do better for you and others around you. And let's not be stuck in feeling I have to work this 9 to 5 for everyone else. With that being said, download Zenboks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.